What is going on, Cultivate family? I hope you're all doing good wherever it is that you're listening to this from today. We are going deep in today, so I'm going to get straight into it. We are going to talk about how we can try and let go of our self-limiting beliefs in a world that feels unwelcoming for a lot of people like us. And I know I'm not the only person that feels this. I know a lot of my clients feel this way. I know a lot of people that talk to me on social media and follow me online. We all kind of have the same thoughts about this. The world is so hostile and unwelcoming to so many folks in marginalized races, genders, bodies. How can we overcome a lot of the negative mental chatter and self-limiting beliefs that everything around us kind of puts on us, in a sense, and then we almost project it back onto ourselves? And there are a lot of people in like the health and wellness space that preach the power of mindset, and I'm definitely an advocate for the power of mindset and mindset tools. But I think what I've always found hard is that people preach a lot of the time from a place of privilege. Now, obviously, at the time of recording this, I'm in a huge place of privilege. I've got a stable place to live for the first time in so long. I make my rent and bill payments just about, unless I have a really tough month of business. And as of this moment in time, my health is good and my body does pretty much everything I need it to. Aside from this, I'm just really clumsy and it would be nice if I wasn't. But regardless of my clumsiness, for the most part, day to day, things are pretty stable for me. But what I'm getting at here is that any oppressed minority of people living in our world at the moment, things can get very bleak, and it can be so easy to fall into the headspace of the world is literally out to get me. There's nothing positive here for me in this space. I won't ever be able to make things work in my adult life. Because honestly, for so many of us, trans folk, for people of color, any oppressed group of people, really, the world does very regularly wage war against us, and they're not afraid to shout about it or make it publicly known on the internet. So it's no wonder this stuff can make us feel so down, so depressed, so despondent, so down on ourselves, and we end up just having huge self-limiting beliefs about our own potential to thrive or do anything positive in our lives. And we can definitely fall into a trap of just feeling like we're never going to get anywhere in the world. But despite the world we live in, I want this podcast to show that despite our current climate and society, there is still all of the positive reasons for you to challenge your own self-limiting beliefs, to get you to a point in your life where you feel like you're a little bit more fulfilled and you're a little bit more content with what you've got going on for yourself. Now, this podcast isn't necessarily just going to be me preaching a mindset is everything, or this is what you need to manifest, or this is the affirmation you need to use. A lot of those tools are valid and help a lot of people. It's never quite been for me, but this podcast is purely just going to be a very real chat from someone that stood in their own way for far too long and really wish that they hadn't held themselves back because of how the world and the people in it were looking at me or were perceiving me or treating me. And that person is obviously me. So a bit of background from me and my story about my self-limiting beliefs. Now, what I'm about to tell you, this isn't the right way to do any of this stuff. This is how things unfolded and happened for me, and it's not necessarily going to be the same for everyone. But I would definitely say at the point when I started working in London at a major record label in 2015, I was quite full of hope for myself in a sense. It was a very big opportunity. I landed a job that over 2,000 people interviewed for. It was like a full-on X Factor process getting that job at one of the biggest labels there was. And eventually, after like a year in that job, maybe even less, I then very controversially to everyone around me left it to pursue touring in a tiny punk band full-time. And I think even at that point, I still felt like I had a lot of hope for my future. But a few years later, I really felt myself struggling and slipping, and I lost all belief in myself. I had been on tour in America for the back end of the Trump and Bernie Sanders campaign. I had been on tour with people who were directly affected from that. We had had a general election in the UK. We'd also had Brexit. There was a lot going on in the world that was making me feel really sad and hopeless. The music industry just completely burnt me out. And I reached a point where I was doing every odd touring job I could to make ends meet, which I probably talked a lot about on here, as well as doing like freelance design work for anyone that could have me, even though that wasn't really something I enjoyed. It was just a means to try and cover the rent. At one point, I lived in a 2-person flat with 3 or 4 people at any time, and I kept getting part-time jobs and just not being able to keep them because despite needing and accepting part-time hours, nobody wanted a worker that wasn't readily available all the time. Which, for any creative person that has a part-time job right now, you'll understand how shitty that is. So, going deeper and deeper into this hole, I developed some really serious body image issues that I'd already had, but they got really, really bad. And with that came an eating disorder. I went into a very, very rough depression. And there was just so many people in my life that made me feel inadequate and worthless. And I was just waking up further and further in the hole every day to the point where I just thought, what is the point? Why should I try and do anything for myself? I'm never going to afford rent. I'm never going to succeed in a career or music. I'm never going to recover from an eating disorder or feel good about myself. There's literally nothing right here for me. And I held that belief for a good few years, and I stayed exactly where I was. Still not quite making a living from work to cover my expenses. Still quietly suffering with an eating disorder and severe body image issues, but pretending I wasn't. I literally just went through the motions of life and hated it more and more every day. Now, I don't know if you've heard the quote, change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. That is what eventually happened to me. The pain of staying exactly where I was far, far more painful than the cost of doing all of the hard things that I needed to do to get myself out of that place. And I wish I had maybe just not left it to that point, but I just generally didn't believe I could change. I told myself I couldn't on the regular, and I also didn't think I deserved to at that point as well. But either way, that pain became so great for me that I had to make really extreme changes. I uprooted my entire life. I broke up with my long-term partner. I moved away. I got eating disorder support. I looked for a low-cost therapist. I did all the stuff that I should have done for myself years ago, but told myself there was no point me doing, or told myself that I wasn't able to do because I was useless or because there was nothing there for me. I started to seek out help actively and take action on things that I had literally ignored my whole life. And that just brought around so many new thoughts and feelings with my gender, with my sexuality, with my mental health. And it was really, really hard to face. But I finally started to see a little bit of hope and a bit more future for the first time. And I wasn't necessarily waking up every day with those same beliefs that the world is out to get me. What's the point? I'll never be able to do this. I'll never be able to do anything. And that was the real shift. I just wasn't talking to myself like that anymore. Now, the point that I want to make here is the world is not a nice place at the best of times. It can feel really unwelcoming and hostile for us to exist in. And so many of us might be on waiting lists for mental health services or gender affirming care while struggling with our day-to-day lives. But if we continue to tell ourselves that we can't do something, anything, we will stay exactly where we are. And I don't think any of us deserve that. Deep down, I don't think any of us really want the rest of our lives to feel like that for ourselves either. We are here regardless of what the world and society looks like. So what do we want to do with our time? And it might not always feel like the perfect situation. It probably never is. But telling ourselves we can't do things or that the society we live in is against us won't move us forward, even if it's true. And I know so many trans folk will be feeling that in the UK with the election stuff that's been going on the last few months. We can only control our environment to a certain degree. So why not focus on controlling the things we actually can to the best of our ability? The people that we surround ourselves with, the media we consume, the people we follow. We may as well spend time figuring out what we enjoy and what fills up our cup because we're here regardless. And if you don't feel capable of doing the hard things, then we need to start building the evidence that you are. And that was a really huge step for me, starting from nothing and slowly building up little bits of evidence that I could do those things for myself. I told myself for years I couldn't, but I started and I was slowly building that data in my mind that, yeah, I did that before, so that means I might be able to tackle this thing now. What that looks like might be different for everyone, but I really do think that we owe it to ourselves to give it our best shot and stop holding ourselves back when the environment doesn't feel optimal or welcoming, because I think for a lot of us, it just probably never will. So if you're really struggling with those self-limiting beliefs at the moment, telling yourselves there's things you can't do, things that you won't ever be able to do, here's a few tips to get you started, coming from a person that has done this so many times over and should have probably done it way sooner. Set goals for yourself and break them down if they feel too big and overwhelming, and make them into realistic small steps. This is both in your personal and professional life. Then document that process so you can look back on it. I wish I had done that so much more at the beginning, but I think I held quite a lot of shame and embarrassment about my journey, and I'm a lot better at doing that these days. Celebrate every small win for yourself along the way before just looking on to the next thing. Give yourself credit for everything that you do, because it's so easy for us to not acknowledge the cool stuff that we did and just be like, right, cool, what do I need to do next? And finally, build the evidence that you can do hard things. And as a result, your mindset won't be the thing holding you back from getting you to where you want to be, because you know for yourself, you've proven it to yourself that you can do those hard things. I have consultations with people about fitness and nutrition and body image coaching every single week. And a lot of people get on the calls with me and say, I don't feel like I could ever be a gym person, or I could never get up early to train. And a lot of the time my question is to them, could you not, or do you not want to? Because there's definitely a difference between a person that wants to try to do something and not let their beliefs hold them back, and a person that actually decides, yeah, that isn't for me. I actually actively don't want to do that. And if you decide that something isn't your flavor, that's cool. But if you just write something off that might feel like a bit of an aspiration or a desirable thing that you want in your life, is it just because it's easier to? It's easier not to try. And I think that's where I was. It was just way easier not to try and look after myself, not to try and fuel my body, not to try and rest my body, not to try and move my body. It was just easier not to. And breaking that pattern completely changed my life. So see, no manifesting, but what I have got for you today is a bit of a reading list for anyone that is wanting to delve more into mindset and self-limiting beliefs. So I've narrowed this list down to like 20 things that you could read, and you could start with any of them. Now, most of these I have read. There's a couple of things in here that I haven't, but have been recommended multiple times by different people, and they're currently on my list of books I'm working through. So let me know if you read any of them. I'm going to put them all in the show notes. I tend to prefer these kind of books as an audio book, unless they specifically come with like worksheets and stuff, because I like to listen to them while I walk or while I'm driving or while I might be in the gym, especially if the person that wrote the book reads it out loud. So if you're not a book reader, definitely check them out on audiobooks. The cool thing about a lot of these titles is they're fairly popular, and I found a lot of them were in my local library or in the local library audiobook app. So if you don't want to pay for them, join your local library. Again, something I wish I'd known that I could do, join a library for free when I was at a point where buying a book would have been a struggle. So I hope this has been helpful. I did say we were going in deep, but if you really feel like you're holding yourself back now, or you have been for what feels like forever with your health and fitness, or maybe it's your nutrition or your body image, if you feel like after listening to this, it's finally time to make that shift, then apply for one of my coffee chats. I've been doing a few more of them recently. The link is in the show notes. You just fill in a little form, tell me about what you're struggling with. We have a little bit of a chat and we'll figure out the first steps together. And if it can help you and you think my coaching could be a good fit, then we'll work together. If it doesn't feel like the right flavor, that's totally cool. I'm always happy to help anyone for 15 minutes if I can. Whew, I feel like I was ready to get all of that off my chest today. It definitely felt like the right week to talk about this stuff. I actually started working with a coach recently, completely unrelated to health and fitness, for my music stuff. And it was someone I used to work with, and I realized that a lot of my self-limiting beliefs that I don't have in the fitness world, I very much still have in the music industry. So I got a lot of stuff to work through on this side of things as well. But I hope this has been helpful for you all. And if you're not yet subscribed to the podcast, give it a follow on whatever platform you're on. And if you got a spare 30 seconds, leave me a review if you fancy it. It really helps, especially on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, because people do check that out to make sure that I'm not spreading loads of misinformation and talking shit like a lot of health and fitness podcasts do. Not naming any names, but there are many. So have an amazing rest of your week, Cultivate family. Take it easy, and that is me out. Bye.